Thanks, Ashley. Again, my name is Katie Andrews, the Justice Services Specialist with the Department of Mental Health. And before I kick off on the frequently asked questions, I just wanted to highlight a few things that we've discussed today. As Ashley said, communication is critical to this program. That signed consent form, we've had issues in the past, just making sure that those are in place in every piece of the client's recovery. So that's, going to the doctor, that's through the probation office, that's through the provider, that it has to be in place in order for this program to be effective. So I wanted to mention that. And then, of course, I wanted to highlight that for any positive UAs, it's important that providers get in contact with the probation and parole office and notify them within 24 hours, because that can guide their treatment plan. So we'll talk a little bit more about UA collection when I discuss that, but I wanted to highlight that. And also, as Ashley mentioned, one thing that we want to make sure that you all understand is that an individual that is primarily, has primary mental illness, they're not appropriate for the program. So while some folks do have co-occurring, they might have depression along with substance use disorder, that's completely appropriate. But for those that are primary mental health, there are other more effective funding sources for those individuals. So keep that in mind. One other thing before we get going I wanted to mention is, that we've talked about a lot of information today. And so I just want you all to know that everybody that's presented here is available for follow-up questions. And particularly, some of our new expansion sites have already planned to go observe other areas, other more established areas, staffings, and maybe even observe an executive level meeting, just so that you can get an idea of how this operates, how it works, and what best practices to establish in your area. So just be thinking about that. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that there's a couple things that following up that I'd like to send everybody if they're interested. When we say communication ladder, it's kind of a document guiding, and some of you may be familiar with it. It's a document guiding in-house local resolution of issues. So, if you're having issues with the provider as probation parole, or the opposite, provider is having issues with the probation and parole, then, try to resolve those disagreements in-house. And if that doesn't work, you go up the ladder and you speak to a supervisor. If that doesn't work, before you start contacting maybe DOC central office or DMH central office, let's try to resolve the issues locally. And of course, we're always willing to step in, myself, Angela Plunkett, or Kelly Dills, to resolve any issues that can't be resolved locally. But I just wanted to make mention of that, and I can send those out, the communication ladder, later. So if you take note of my email, Katie Andrews, at the end of the slide, I'd be happy to send that, as well as, I'm going to highlight some frequently asked questions today, but there's an entire document full of questions that we've encountered through the process of this program. So I'd be happy to send that. Those are in the works of getting updated, but once they're complete, I'll be sending those out to everybody, so you can just kind of familiarize yourself with some things we've learned along the way. So for now, I'm just going to discuss some frequently asked questions that we've encountered. With every new program, there's always things that need further clarification. So, and again, I know that most of the new expansion site providers have established area providers that are already providing ICTS services. And so feel free to contact them if you have any questions, or myself. But one point I wanted to make is, this is specifically for providers. When entering a client into the CMOR system, that's our database, there's no JRI specific program. There's only a billing service category titled ADA Justice Reinvestment. And so when you go to enter the client, a lot of times they'll be entered into a C-STAR program, but they will be billed to the JRI specific category. Okay, and so that might be confusing. Again, please reach out if you have questions on that to me or an established site that's in your provider realm. So moving on, contingency management. Contingency management is what we use to incentivize positive efforts towards recovery and productive behavior from clients. So I mentioned early on that there are incentives for providers, but this is for clients. So clients are eligible for up to $50 per month per client, and that may include payments for compliance with their prescribed medications. Are they taking their meds on time? Are they getting refills as they should be? And you'll know all these things by keeping track of those consent forms and having increased communication between all providers, including physicians. Are they being honest regarding any use of substances, either no use or low use of substances? When they're testing, are they reducing their use? Do they have no substance use? And are they participating in the recovery community? So those are all eligibility criteria for them to earn that contingency management. And we actually have a whole webinar series dedicated to learning more about using contingency management in the treatment model. And so we can send those out to folks, and you'll be able to review those and learn more about how that works. But it's a really good idea for clients to, it helps them stay engaged, makes their self-esteem spike up. It's great for clients to get things that they might not be able to get normally. So for instance, this is just one example that we've used previously is if we have a female client who wants to take her contingency management and go get her nails done, make her feel better about herself. That's what that's used for. So it's just a thought. Also, documentation for contingency management must include receipts for purchases and a perpetual inventory log with the client's signature. We just need those to reflect that the client has received that contingency management. Incentives. So like I said, I mentioned that before. I just wanted to mention here that providers do not bill for assessments. The Department of Mental Health Division of Behavioral Health will assess that and pay it quarterly. Staffings, I know that that's been mentioned pretty frequently throughout, but I just wanted to reiterate that staffing is a specific time set aside for the team to gather and discuss each client's progress. All team members, that includes the probation officers, the JRI, the ICTS treatment team members, including the peer and the employment and housing specialists, they should all attend to ensure coordinated and effective service provision. Each team member will provide accurate and timely information about the client's progress in the program, and that's where you make the recommendations about incentives, sanctions, any therapeutic consequences. Decisions are to be made by the entire team and not just one team member. So again, this is a real team-based program, and so that communication is critical. The frequency of those staffings may vary according to the individualized needs of the area, but they must be held at least twice a month. Treatment providers will be required to document and retain a record of the staffings, which will include a sign-in sheet of who attended and a separate progress note in the individual's medical record. So that progress note is that PAR, or progress assessment report, that was mentioned earlier. Next, we have housing. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the differences in the different housing structures that we support our clients with. Only one housing code can be invoiced per client per day. And so a client may be, and I think Latoya mentioned this, a client may be living in supportive housing. Supportive housing is when we assist the client with a rent, deposit, utility assistance. That can be up to $700 per month. The consumer must be actively engaged in treatment services and employed, or actively engaged with the employment specialist and expect to obtain employment in the near future. So on that one, I just want to kind of mention, if a client is not employed and they want a first month's rent, deposit, and utilities turned on, that doesn't seem like the ideal way to help that client, because once they get into the housing and they don't have a job and maybe they're not looking for a job, how are we going to continue housing that client? How will they stay in that sustained housing without any form of income? So that's why, that's a necessary marker of criteria, is that the client needs to be looking for employment or they need to be employed in order for us to support them. Now, that's not to say that we want any client to be homeless. Absolutely, we look for any and all resources to get a client in housing, because that's clearly a barrier to them focusing on their recovery. But I just wanted to mention that, clients need to be engaged and looking for employment if we're to help them get into housing. So if supportive housing is needed for more than 3 months, or if the monthly rent exceeds $7, authorization must be obtained from DMH. So that's a funding request form that, you'll fill those out, you'll send it in to me specifically, and I will process that with the Department of Corrections, Kelly Dills, and then we will send you notification of whether or not it was approved or denied. Most generally, you just explain, what the client's situation is. Are they actively engaged? Are they employed? How much have they used in the past? What community resources were explored? Those are all questions on that form. And then we take a look at that and determine, okay, this client seems appropriate for us to to assist them paying for their rent. Maybe they had to use their paycheck on paying restitution or probation and parole fees or something like that, and because they were going to be in trouble if they didn't. And so then that left them short on rent. Well, we would want to be able to support that client so they didn't have to worry about being evicted. If they were evicted, how would they go to treatment? All these things are a snowball effect, and so we want to stop that before it starts. So of course, documentation must include receipts, invoices with the actual cost of the expenditure, and a copy of the email authorization from DBH if over $700 per month. So when you send in that funding request form, I'll send you back that request form with approved on the form attached to the email, and it will also say in the body of the email that it has been approved. Now that email itself is what needs to be printed and kept. You can also keep the funding request form that says approved for your documentation records. That's very important. The next type of housing is transitional housing. So that's a daily rate of $25.50 per day per client. The arrangement or provision of safe, appropriate, substance-free housing in the community on a short-term or long-term basis, provided in order to maximize, of course, the effectiveness of treatment and rehabilitation. So that's them staying at some type of, sober living house, some type of transitional living facility, and we can, pay that agency directly on the client's behalf. The residents must be a NAR accredited or National Affiliate for Recovery Residences affiliate or accredited, and they must allow for medication-assisted treatment. Because some of our clients are coming off of significant substances and they need that those MAT services to do that. So we want to make sure that they are capable of continuing those services while in housing. Lastly, we have our housing package. Now, this is fairly new to the game, and only some areas so far have these housings, but I just wanted to mention that in some areas there are JRI housing or ICTS housing, which allows the community treatment provider to subcontract with DMH certified recovery support service providers. They're also NAR accredited. They provide peer support, group sessions, and pro-social activities in the home. And so, like I said, not every area is going to have this. Maybe further on down the line, that's an option. But I did just want to mention it in case you hear it later on, especially on our weekly check-in calls that we've been having. And lastly, again, I mentioned if a client is homeless, that is the last place or situation we want themselves to find themselves in. So what we can do is offer sometimes in last resort options. Hotels are to be used on an emergency basis. Again, that's if the client is homeless or in harm's way, when other housing options are not available. So prior authorization from DBH, which is Division or Department of Mental Health, and DOC is required if a hotel stay is anticipated to last more than 7 days. So for instance, a client just started their job, but they got kicked out of their parents' house. So there's this window of getting a paycheck and being able to get housing that they're not going to have anywhere to lay their head. Well, that can affect them going to work. They just got that job. They might miss work because they have nowhere to live. So we would potentially, based on individualized issues, and again, all of these housing options are treatment team-driven decisions. So the PO's office should be completely aware and supportive of the providers, perhaps the provider's idea of housing efforts. So just make sure you guys are in communication, you agree on a plan, And then if necessary, you submit that plan to DMH and DOC. So next, let's say that outreach. So let's say that the probation office has identified an appropriate referral for services in the ICTS program, and you schedule an appointment for an assessment and the client doesn't show. The provider may bill for outreach when attempting to get the client to their appointment. They may also bill for outreach in pre-release outreach and communication with individuals referred from institutional settings to facilitate that initiation and continuity of care. So on the first one, let's say that, again, your client doesn't make it to the first appointment. The provider is able to outreach, go have the peer go see if they're at their residence, or call them, or however you facilitate that outreach service that is billable for a non-specific consumer service. UA collection. I'm going to talk in depth about this here in a little bit, but just to mention a few key points. Certified peer specialists should not be collecting urine drug screens from ICTS clients. That collection is not in the peer support core competencies, and it's not listed in the clinical services bulletin. DOC and DMH have authorized providers to subcontract with drug testing or UA collection agencies, such as AberHealth or Tomo, which follow the Missouri UA collector standards, including frequency, observation, chain of custody requirements, and randomized requirements. So funds to subcontract from that UA collector will come from your current ICTS or your request. So UA collection is a big deal in the program. It guides the therapeutic services that we provide. It helps determine on what path the client should be, what intensity their level of services are, where they should be housed. I mean, it has so many implications for services that it's a really important aspect of the treatment, the treatment plan. So making sure that those follow those Missouri core standards is especially important. Now, if you aren't familiar with the ones that I listed, AberHealth or Tomo, there are other ones. And if you need that list of agencies, it's actually provided through the Missouri Drug Course. I can facilitate that and get that list from Angela Plunkett. She is the Justice Services Manager with the Department of Health. And she has a list of of agencies that would be appropriate to provide those services. So moving on, wraparound funding. This is a wraparound structure for the program, but it also is considered a funding. We have what's called wraparound funding. Wraparound funds are intended to be used for clients who are in need of supports and services that they can't afford, or for which there is no other method of payment. Before using or requesting wraparound funds, the team should explore resources in the community and determine that there is not an agency or program that can meet that need. So the goal essentially is teaching clients to become self-sufficient and enable them to seek community resources after JRI discharge or ICTS discharge. So documentation of wraparound must include receipts, invoices with the actual cost of the expenditure. And if the expenditure is over $500, the provider must submit a funding request form. Again, I mentioned that before, to me for processing. Once approved, the provider documentation must include a copy of the email authorization from DBH. So when using wraparound funding, wraparound might be appropriate. Let's say a client has purchased a vehicle, but they cannot afford to get it registered. They can't afford insurance. And they've just got a job, so they need it to get back and forth to work. Depending on the cost and the client's standing in the program, we might approve that for the client to eliminate that barrier to their recovery. I know in some cases, for example, they have helped a client with their dental situation. So sometimes if the client has, severe dental issues and they go seeking employment, they might be, they might have some biases, that the employer might have some biases. And so to eliminate that barrier, we would, help potentially provide that service to the client. Again, these are individualized. They are approved by the team. It's a decided upon necessity for the client. It is a barrier to their recovery. And so that's when you would submit that if it was over $500. If it's under $500 and the team supports that cost, then you would go ahead and pay that cost through the team decision. Mileage. So this one is kind of confusing, and that's essentially why we put it on here and had to make a bulletin about it and put it in the FAQs. It is in the contract, so you can read all this in the contract, but to kind of just highlight the differences and the similarities here. When a community support or maybe a peer support specialist take a client to an appointment or something, if they are providing treatment plan related discussions in the car on the way to that appointment, they can bill for that intervention time in addition to the mileage that they're able to bill. So you can bill mileage for the client there and back, return trip, but you may also bill for intervention time provided if you're providing treatment plan relevant, you know, discussions in the car. So say you're going to a doctor appointment and the peer specialist is directly speaking about goals on the individual's treatment plan, or maybe it's better suited for the care coordinator is discussing certain treatment plan goals, then you would be able to bill for intervention time. And I just want to reiterate here that some of this information is coming at you kind of fast. So feel free to follow up with us, and I'd be happy to go in depth in some of this information. Contracted UA collection. So this is where I wanted to kind of discuss. These slides were actually provided to us through one of the agency that's collecting for multiple providers across the state. And as they noted here, the single most important aspect of effective drug testing program is witnessed or observed collections. And so I think I mentioned that before. Some key components of observed collection: they check the ID every time. They have the clients wash their hands, rolling up their sleeves, lifting their shirt to certain criteria, lowering their pants, just making sure that there are no barriers to a valid collection. They have them turn around 360 degrees. Females cough. They do midstream collections. They observe directly the client providing the specimen. Males and females are not allowed to shelter view in any form. Their testing is random. The days will be different from week to week and from month to month. That includes weekends and holidays, which is agreed upon between the agencies. So 365 days a year, the clients are potentially up for being tested, which is really critical, because if there's a long weekend and, state offices, probation and parole may be off, or providers, they may be closed, but the collection agencies are not, and they will continue providing that services just to make sure there's no gaps in the client's treatment plan. So what's expected from participants? Well, participants are provided very clear instructions on what they're to do. They call a toll-free interactive voice response number every day. Again, that includes weekends and holidays. They report to the testing site during a specified time limit testing window, and they're aware of that. That time window is before, they would be going to work, or perhaps after they go to work. It's a flexible time period so that it does not directly affect their ability to get to their job or groups. It uses an interactive voice response. So it's similar to other IVR systems. When you call to make a payment and that you have that automated system, it's similar to that. It asks for 2 pieces of information to confirm the party on the phone. There's a unique identifier that is given to the client, so they know what numbers to push in for that. And they are required to confirm the last letters of their last name. And so I'm going to play an example of what the client hears when they call in, so they know they have to test. They are the name is their name is verified when they call to test, and when they show up, they have to provide an ID. So this is completely valid throughout. So there's so many steps that they're taking that makes sure that this is a valid collection for the treatment team's use. So I'm just going to play this for you real quick. Press 1 for English. Enter your ID number. Does your last name begin with D-O-N? If yes, press 1. If no, You are required to test today. You are required to test today. You are required to test today. And so I just wanted to kind of share that example with you all so that you are aware of what they hear when they call in. And so it's very clear that that client was determined to test that day. If the client is not testing that day, it will do the same thing, but it will repeat it 3 times so they're clear. So these are the instructions that are provided to clients so they know exactly what their responsibility is and when and where they have to do everything. So you can see on this form, you know, that was the sample that we just heard was a client name test donor. That's their unique identifier number right there underneath that. They have the phone number to call, and it also walks them through the prompts of calling. Not to mention, it tells them that beginning on this date, I am responsible, you know, the client is responsible for calling in to that notification system Monday through Sunday between 4 a.m. and 3:59 p.m. So they have plenty of time to call before they have to go to work, you know, etc. So this is what the form looks like that the client gets. They sign it, the worker signs it, a witness signs it. I mean, it is very clear instruction on what they're supposed to do. And I just like to note on the phone system instruction, it says, if you call before 4 a.m., this is what you'll hear. If you call after 4, this is what you'll hear. So you have to call between those designated number or time periods. So best practices before implementation. It's important to make sure that the team fully understands the system and how it works. That's why it's kind of important to include it in today's training. Is everybody needs to know that the client is well informed of where and when they're supposed to call and be, and of the instructions of how the UA collection agencies operate. It's important to dialogue with the participants about change. You know, the treatment team needs to expect to see some positives when these folks begin this structured collection. Provide call instructions and save copies on hand so you can discuss, you know, in team meetings, discuss with clients, explain the similarity to other IVR systems. Just let them know it's very similar to when you would call and make an automated payment. You enter information, it tells you what to do next. And another good idea is to start using the system 1 week in advance. So a lot of our agencies, or a lot of our providers have implemented this collection agency subcontracting. And so before the contract was in place, a week prior to that, they would get their clients in, you know, the repetition of calling every day. You have to call every day. And, you know, I'll talk about this here in a minute, but if you're not calling, there are consequences. So if you start having the client make that call a week in advance, it will get them in the habit of making that call every single morning or whenever they call, every afternoon before 4. Best practices after implementation, verify that participants are calling. So there's going to be an individual that's designated to receive reports from the UA collection agency that's going to say this person hasn't called, we haven't heard from them, they're not calling consistently, and then that would be then the provider or PO's job to follow up with the client and say, you know, you're not meeting this criteria of the program, you have to be calling daily. Again, that's just contacting immediately participants not calling, and then verifying that participants are testing. So you'll also receive the results, immediate results of those clients, you know, specimens. Were they positive? Were they negative? And then you'll be able to determine, okay, this person was deemed to test, but they did not show up. So we will have to, you know, whatever the consequence may be after that situation. A couple of the last slides, we just wanted to show you guys some of the, you know, what fun looks like. So it's not all just business. Recovery can be fun. These are some folks engaging in pro-social activities, enjoying a group float trip. These are actual current ICTS clients. And so you can tell that they're having a good time. You know, this is what success of the program looks like. People living life, having, you know, peer relationships, positive peer relationships. Again, here is some more pictures from that trip that just happened. I believe it was either last weekend or the weekend before. But this is this is what some of our folks are doing. They're, you know, they're maintaining their recovery and enjoying themselves along the way. So on the last slide here is our contact information. And so I encourage you to either jot these down as we check for questions, but please feel free to follow up with us if we've you know, had something that you have further questions about. And right now, I'd just like to ask that if anybody does have questions, feel free to ask those questions over in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. And I'm going to give a little bit for those questions to be asked. Okay, and so it looks like we did have at least one question. The question is, did I hear you say that treatment providers should no longer be collecting UAs from clients? We should only be using the contracted collectors. So I will say that in the ICTS program, it is strongly encouraged that providers utilize the UA collection agencies. It's going to come from the money that you already get, and it can be covered, but we are strongly encouraging that folks use the UA collection agencies. Every provider that so far is in the ICTS program either has or is in the process of putting a contract in place for that collection. So, you know, that is just to make sure that, unless you can follow those Missouri drug court standards, those Missouri core standards at your agencies, which that's, you know, the random collections, it has to be, it's just not usually feasible for providers to follow those standards. And so it's preferred and encouraged that you use the UA collection agencies. And I would like, if you would email me after this, I'd be happy to follow up with you and provide you some more information on that. So I'm, again, Katie Andrews there at the top of the screen, and we can discuss that in some more detail. But yeah, everybody has a contract in place to use these UA collection agencies. Now, what I said was that peer support should not be collecting UAs. It is not in their core competencies. So that was specifically peer support should not be collecting those specimens. But I have any other questions?
Katie, you may have said this already, but one of the questions in the chat box was, do they get a copy of these slides?
I will double check that that's okay with you know, DOC and DMH folks, and then I'd be happy to. And Cindy, will I have a list of participants to send them out to?
Yes, we have that.
Great.
If you'd like, try unmuting everybody and seeing if they have a question, or if you raise your hand, I can unmute you if you use your audio pins, and then or you can continue using them in the chat box.
Any takers?
Hey,
well,
Katie, I had submitted a question, and I also raised my hand.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Do you see the question that I submitted?
Was it about the only question I see is about collecting UAs.
Okay, so mine says, what is the protocol if we transport a client long distance, drop them off, and then return in regard to billing? Of course, we can't do an intervention on the way home, but that is also an ample amount of a time commitment.
Absolutely. So when transporting a client a certain distance, you can, obviously you bill mileage there and back, whether the client's pregnant, or I'm sorry, whether the client's present on the way back or not. So if you drop the client off and you're on your way back alone, you can still bill mileage there and back. So now for providing an intervention, you are able to provide the intervention on the way there. and you may bill intervention time on the way back for the amount of time that you spent providing intervention on the way there. I know that is so confusing. So let's say, and I think that was Ashanti. Ashanti, let's say that I'm the client and you're taking me to a treatment facility in a neighboring town, and we're in the car for an hour, and we spend 30 minutes of that hour discussing my treatment plan and specific treatment relevant information. So we spend 30 minutes going over that on that hour ride. You drop me off, and on the way back, you are able to bill for intervention time for that 30 minutes again, and then the mileage for the entire trip. Okay. So, and that would just need to be provided in clear, separate documentation of the intervention provided, and that the client was not present or was present on the way there, and then the mileage separately. Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, this is Michael Mellion. I opened up the question box, and there are quite a few questions in there.
Oh, I don't know why I can't see them. You mind reading them to me, Mike? I can't see those questions, so would anybody mind reading those? Mike, maybe?
1 second, because you did answer a couple of them already.
Okay.
I can read you one. It says, since the program is new in Phelps and Pulaski counties, are the people that we can contract for job, are the people that we can contract for jobs and housing? Who did you use in your area? Are there flyers that we can bring out to the community to explain the program?
So we do actually have a nice one pager, and I'll double check with my supervisor, Angie, to make sure that that is still appropriate to use. I think it needs to be updated to reflect the change from JRI to ICTS, but it's kind of a one pager just discussing the model, the wraparound model, and what the program is about. And let me talk a little bit more about employment and housing specialists and their role. So in our established areas, how this has worked before is our housing and employment specialists, first they go out and they make contacts with area folks, so community resources. So for instance, the housing specialist might go talk to the low income housing folks, or go meet different apartment individuals, just different agencies that they could build networks with. And again, that is the same for employment specialists. They might go to different agencies looking for who's hiring, go to those different express personnel and agencies like that to get networks established that they can call on and say, hey, I've got an individual here, this is their hours that they have available. Do you have anything available? Well, yes, I've got a factory job available, and have them come my way. And so that's their job, is going out and establishing those connections, and then working with the client to fit the client in the right connection, if that makes sense. And so I think that one pager might help them kind of do that. And just, there are, or have been in the past, employment agencies that help folks find jobs. And so that's essentially what your role is understanding where they're at in the treatment, in the treatment process, and then helping them get employment that complements that treatment process. So it's the same but different. And so I think it would be helpful for you to maybe take that one pager and just say, this is how I fit in, this is my job. I'm representing clients from an agency who are currently progressing through their recovery. They have, some amount of recovery time, and they're looking to, find employment that would benefit them. And sometimes that's the client's job to go in, and all your job to do is to prepare them for that, going to make those community connections. So I hope that I answered that question, and please speak up if I didn't.
Okay, I have one.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Ty Scott asks, can someone discuss the JRITP Community Treatment and Recovery Services Progress Assessment?
So is Jared still on? Would that be the Progress Assessment Report, the PAR?
Yes, I'm on. So, Ty, That form is located at MOCIS. I'll send it to you. It's really pretty self-explanatory, and I just sent you some information via email about forms for community partners. And in that, I believe in that folder, you will also see, I thought there was specific instructions on how to fill that form out. And I believe that form instructions, excuse me, and I'm waiting for it to come up, is titled, or the folder is titled in our K drive, in the folder JRI treatment forms, how to fill that PAR out, and the instructions on how to submit that is titled PAR Notice Final 192002, and that the date on that form is February 3rd, 2020, when it was updated.
I have one here. Crystal Parra, and I hope I pronounced that right, asks, are peer support allowed to participate in community services / activities with clients?
Yes, so I'd like to, that's a great question. And I'd just like to mention that our peer support specialists are not just token individuals that are meant to, you know, kind of be there as a peer token for the individual, saying that I'm the voice of individuals, you know, that are experiencing substance use disorders. So what their role is to really provide some of that almost a case management aspect. You know, they help with transportation. They assist the client with things that maybe we don't. They stay in constant communication with the client. And Jared, you may be able to talk a little bit more about what peers do up in Boone County, but their role is really circular. It really supports the client in areas that maybe others can't. So they do provide some of that community support. Jared, what do you have to add?
I would say that the peer support and locally for us is probably the individual that's most connected with the clients themselves. So from the P&P standpoint, those peer supports are the ones that are almost in daily contact and are our eyes and ears of what's going really on with the client outside of probation and parole. They're the ones that the client gets comfortable with contacting, and they may know them out in the recovery community. They're going to know who the parents are, family, and they're going to have that connection. And our officers use them quite frequently to assist, and are definitely a vital part and a vital team member of the JRI team, or the ICTS team.
Yeah, and I will also add to that I've sat in a few staffings, and what I've noticed is that, you know, maybe the provider or maybe the PO has said, you know, I haven't heard from this client. They were supposed to meet with me yesterday, but they didn't show. And the provider will say, yeah, well, they were supposed to come in yesterday afternoon and they didn't come. And then I've heard the peer pipe up and say, yeah, you know, they were sick. In fact, they just went to the urgent care yesterday morning, and I'm pretty sure they've been down with whatever sickness. And, you know, they just know the client. Again, like Jared said, they know them on a different level. They run into them in the recovery community. Maybe they're going to meetings together, but they are vital to the team. And I hope that that answers your question. If not, feel free to speak up and I'd be happy to elaborate. And if not, we can just move on. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have one from Shannon Rainwater. This is a 3-part question. Since the program is new to Phelps and Pulaski counties, are there people that we can contact for jobs in housing? Who did you use in your area? Is there flyers we can bring out to the community to explain the program?
So I think this is the one that I kind of answered earlier about using that one pager. And again, I'll get some approval to make sure that it's still up to date and relevant. And then we can send that out to the group along with the slides if approved.
And I just, regarding Phelps and Pulaski counties, I just sent Ty some general information over some flyers that may assist with overview of the program, then maybe that will help with some of your community partners as well, bringing them up to speed on what's going on, what the program's about, and why it was originally initiated and what some of the overall goals are.
And to add to that, I wanted to say that for employment specialists specifically so far, there will be one for housing specialists too, but for now, we have this employment specialist monthly summary document that our established areas are using currently. And basically what it is it kind of tracks your interactions with clients. What did you do this month as far as resume building, contact, networking, interviewing skills, educational opportunities, any on-the-job training, any skills training, assessing the client's soft skills. Are they good at problem resolution? Things like that. We've got this document that it's a 3-part Excel document, and on the first page is just that tracking empty cells that you can input the information. I met with 3 clients, 4 hours this week about how to fill out a resume and things like that. The second tab of that document is a key that kind of explains or gathers specific data. How many network connections did you make this month? How many folks did you check in with this month? And then the last page of that data will really be relevant to the employment specialist role. It outlines what those measures are. What is resume building? What am I doing with the communication piece? What should I be doing in the network piece? And it really provides detailed descriptions of what the employment specialist should be doing. Now, it was developed with the help of one of our established employment specialists, Amanda Chen. She did a great job of assisting, helping us put that together. She actually built her own booklet on what she does when she meets with client. Each client gets these handmade booklets that she made, just kind of assessing what's your work history, what have you done in the past, what's your education history, and just compiling that from scratch, the client's situation, and helping them build off that to get into a more permanent job role, or even career ready. Do they want to go to school? Do they want to get enrolled in college? Things like that. And so again, I will send that out after this so that you all have that. And the housing summary is being developed currently. And so you'll have that too. And I also want to mention that in the contract, we're in the current state of revising the contract only to add a few things. One is an employment specialist job summary or job description, and a housing specialist job description. And so that can kind of help you understand what their role is and what's expected of them. And so I'll be able to send those out as well.
Okay, Angie Plunkett had expounded on a question earlier. Just to clarify Ashante's question, the contract requires DBH approval for mileage exceeding 100 miles per day.
Yeah, that's great. So what she's saying is that Ashanti asked, when going those long distances, and we talked about billing intervention time, exceeding 100 miles must receive prior approval.
This next one's for me. Brandy Kennan stated, it was mentioned earlier that risk may be confusing to some and defined different between DOC and DMH. The training slides later stated responsivity needs are sometimes misunderstood by P&P. Ideally, what I was trying to present there is that everyone needs to be on the same page when you're referring to risk. Same thing with the responsivity needs. Individuals may think that, I'm trying to kind of wrap my words around it. Like we had mentioned, criminogenic, non-criminogenic needs. So in other words, I'm just going to try to give a personal example. If you're in a staffing, someone may say, okay, well, we got to address the substance use issue right now. Well, there may be other things that need to be addressed in there as well. Somebody may not understand that, well, why are they using again? Well, I didn't know that they just lost their job. I didn't know that they just lost their home. So sometimes it's not clearly defined, if you will. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. It's just to make sure that everyone is on the same page when you're identifying like what we call high risk and the different types of needs that we're trying to address.
Yeah, I think that explains it perfectly, Mike. And I'd also mention that, when he said that maybe POs don't understand that as well as historically, POs maybe have taken a more punitive outlook on clients' relapse or just issues that are affecting their ability to progress through their recovery. But this program is a more therapeutic look, that there might be other areas of their life that are decreasing in stability, which is increasing their use patterns. So I think that's also what he meant by that. Do we have any more questions, Mike?
I don't see any other questions in here. If I missed something, please just type something in there for me.
Yeah, and feel free to unmute your line and ask questions directly through the webinar. Just want to give a little time in case anybody's typing anything. Well, Mike, if you'll keep your eye on that, I just want to ask, did any of my fellow presenters have anything to add before we close for today?
I just want to say if anybody regarding from the P&P side or anyone for that matter has any questions, please feel free to reach out. The last slide has my email and be happy to answer any questions. There are a lot of resources out there. We've been doing this, we're going on our second year for this program. It's taken on a lot of different forms, but for the most part, it is remained in just the meat and bones of it. All right, the bones of the program really haven't changed. All right, but how we've kind of identified that population and we've learned some things throughout the years. But ultimately, the thing to take away from this is you are truly dealing with people's lives. So no matter what, we may look at criteria that says, they need to meet A, B, C, D, and E categories before we'll accept. Please know that that's also, we're going to take that into consideration when we're looking at wanting to save people's lives, and we're ultimately trying to protect them and the community as a whole. But should you have any concerns or you have any questions about anything, please feel free to reach out to me.
I'd just like to add.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This is Michael Mellion, Area Treatment Coordinator. I just wanted to add too, especially with the new sites coming on, everyone is going to have, like an area treatment coordinator that's also going to be there to liaison, answer questions, to assist. I've been fortunate enough to be able to watch the Boone County grow, Polk County, Greene County's growing, and I've seen some fabulous outcomes since I've been doing this job. And also from the DLC side, it seems like they're keeping more people out and stable and doing better than with these wraparound services. So this stuff does work.
This is Ashley Battles, the other area treatment coordinator, and I'm just going to also agree with Mike and Jared there that this is a phenomenal program. Pretty much all the probation and parole districts I talk to and officers say how much they really enjoy the program, and it just has such a phenomenal impact on the clients that we serve. It's just amazing. And once again, just stressing again how important that communication piece is. That's where some of the biggest issues that I see. So having just stressing that communication is key in a lot of areas.
And I think that not only does this improve a client's relationship with, maybe their probation and parole officer, but it also improves provider contact with our PO office, because, A lot of clients that are, a lot of the clients that are served may be just as involved, and so that just helps promote that piece of communication in other program areas that you may be providing. So, Mike, did you see that we had any other questions?
Just a couple thank yous from Shannon Rainwater, and then Robin Bench says, thank you all for the information. It is very helpful.
Great. I would also like to say that this is being recorded, so it will be available for you to share with new staff as you continue to implement the program in your area. You will be able to share this with new staff, and our contact information will still remain the same. So please feel free to reach out. I'm on behalf of Department of Mental Health, so if you have any questions in that area, I'd be happy to answer them. Any of the DOC related questions, Jared, Ashley, or Michael would be great resources. Latoya has done an amazing job down there in Butler County. She was great for a provider aspect. Again, feel free to contact us if you feel like you'd like to observe maybe some of the more established areas. It's a really great way to put your knowledge to a practical application of the program, and let us know if we can help support you in any way. We really appreciate you all joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions that you failed to ask today, please reach out and we'd be happy to answer those for you. In any case, I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and thank you so much.